like to invite you to come along and listen to a story, but I need your help. I'd like you to do some actions for me. So when we're talking about walking or marching, I want you to get up and march, or you can just sit down and just do your knees. And then sometimes we're going to go, and we can't say anything, so we go, shh. But sometimes we'll be blowing trumpets, so we're going, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And I want you to help me to do that. But I'd like to tell you a story about a man named Joshua. Now Joshua loved God, and he wanted to do whatever God told him to do. But you know, sometimes it's not easy to do what we're told to do. I'm sure when your mom and dad tell you to go up and clean your room, you don't want to do that. But you do it because they told you to do it. And God has told us that we need to obey our moms and dads. And Joshua was the same way. Now he marched around in the wilderness or the desert for 40 years with all his people because God was sending them to the promised land. And Moses was the leader, and Joshua was like his right-hand man toward the end of the years. But it came time that Moses died. And Joshua was chosen to be the next leader. Now, I don't know about you, but I think I would find that really hard, to find that I now have to tell everybody what to do. But you know, Joshua did it because he knew that God wanted him to do it. He also knew that God would be with him. And so they crossed over the river, and when they got to the river, they had to go into the promised land. And the first city they came to was the city of Jericho. Now, Jericho was not like our cities today. It was a big, big city. But it also had high walls, so nobody could climb up them. They were about 20 feet high, they tell me. And they were so thick that they built houses on top of them. And people lived there. And you know, that would scare me. And Joshua went up to the walls one day and he looked at them and he thought, what am I going to do? He said, God, what do you want me to do? How am I going to take this city? There's only a couple of gates, and they don't open them for anybody. And so God said, listen, I want you to get the people together, and I want you to put the soldiers first. Then I want you to get the priests. Now, the priests were the ones who worked in the church, but they also had to carry the box called the Ark of the Covenant. And they said, they'll be next. They'll be the ones with the trumpets. Then all the people will be behind. And they're to march. March, remember, march. But they're not to say anything. And Joshua, but how are we going to get into those cities with all that? He says, you do once around every day for 6 days. Because Joshua believed God. He knew that God was going to be, even if it looked ridiculous. So he got all the people together, the soldiers and the priests and all the people. He said, come on, let's march. So let's march. And they marched, and they marched, and they marched the whole way around the city. And then they went back to camp. They did the same thing the next day. They marched around the city as much as they could. And they did it the 3rd day, and the 4th day, and the 5th day, and the 6th day. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was one of those people, I would start thinking, I think Joshua's got it wrong. What good is this going to do? And I couldn't talk all day, some of the ladies probably said, or even some of the men. But you see, they had faith in God. And they had faith in Joshua. So the 7th day, they got up and they marched around the wall 1 time, 2 times, and they kept marching and marching and marching and marching, and 3 times, but all the time they couldn't say anything. But they kept marching and they quiet. Can you imagine that? 1 million people and not making any noise? What about the people inside the city? I'm sure they were watching that. And they were wondering, what's going on here? 6 days, this is the 7th day. And they walked around it once, and twice they marched around, and 3 times they marched around, and 4 times they marched around it, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, without a sound except their footprints. And then Joshua said, shout! And the priests were going to blow their trumpet. And that's exactly what happened. The people shouted. The the priest blew their trumpet, and you know what happened? The walls fell down, and they could go into the city, take everything, and they conquered the city. Now, what would have happened? Way back at the beginning, Joshua said, this is a crazy idea. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do what God told me to. I don't believe it's going to happen. And the walls wouldn't have fallen down. But God was testing Joshua. And sometimes God tests us. Now, God has told us in the Bible that we're to obey our moms and dads. And I'm sure you've heard that before. But it also says we have to obey those who are in authority over us. That means your school teachers, your grandmas, your grandpas, because they're part of your parents too. We have to do what they tell us, even when we don't want to. And let's just stop and ask God to help us to be able to do what, just like Joshua did. You know, you're not going to knock walls down in Jericho, but God's going to honor what you do. So let's just pray. Father, we thank you so much that you love each one of us. Help us to do what you want us to do. Help us to obey our moms and dads and everyone else. Amen. Thank you for listening.